My name is Josie Gillen. I am a program manager at Google. Currently, I'm in their core developer productivity group, and I'm super excited to kick us off today and welcome TPMs to this in-person and virtual book signing. So I want to give you a bit of a background as to how this happened. But before I do, well, kind of related to how this happened is, has anybody read the book called The Phoenix Project by Gene Kim? And it's very interesting. It is about 2013, but it has had a few editions released since then. It's basically, here's the tag, the little subtitle, a novel about DevOps. So yes, it's a fiction book about DevOps. And we follow the story of this guy called Bill, who's an IT director, who basically ends up, his manager and his manager is fired, and he ends up in inheriting this complete mess. And as program managers, as TPMs, you would just cringe at some of the stories he has to tell because it's the stuff we deal with every day. Anyway, fast forward, and last October, I started reading a book called The Unicorn Project. And The Unicorn Project is also by Gene Kim. And this time we follow Maxine, who's a senior developer architect. And we hear the whole story, the same story from her point of view. And it's just, it is a novel. And it's really quite interesting, so I would recommend it. But I'm reading it, and in the book, we are introduced to Kristen, and Kristen is in program management. So it got me thinking, oh, hey, I wonder if there's any books on TPM. So I did this Google search, and I couldn't find any books about technical program management. I found a lot of books about agile and project management, but then I couldn't find anything on technical program management. But then I did. I found one that said it was being released in February. And this was the book being written by Josh. So before I was to reach out to Josh, I just kind of wanted to say, is this legit? Hey, Josh is a technical program manager at Amazon. So I reached out to him on LinkedIn and we started chatting. And that's when I got introduced to Janet as well. And the three of us have kind of been talking about doing something since then. We are actually thinking of having a TPM summit in the fall. I'm a big proponent of cross-company collaboration. I think it's really great to get everybody from the same function at different companies working together. And so we've started to plan that. If anyone's interested in helping, come let us know. But we thought, well, why don't we do a book signing? So big thanks to Josh and Janet for all the organizing. So this is why we're here today. Who's read the book? Anyone here read the book? It's pretty solid. Good. Yay. So a little bit. I haven't finished it either. But a couple of things I really like about the book. First of all, he has things like, this is a table, like looking at job descriptions from Apple and Google and Microsoft. And part of the book is all about the career growth of a TPM. So I love that. In addition, he has a case study. So he talks about like an actual case study, and I'm sure he'll talk a bit more about that in the Fireside Chat. And finally, very easy to read, very accessible, and at the end of each chapter is a nice summary. So I am very excited to kick this off. So before I do, I'm just going to say one last thing. Thank you, Josh. Thank you for writing this book. I'm very happy that we have a book on TPM. And as Josh said, it's probably not the last book on TPM. So maybe you're going to inspire some more people to write a book about technical program management. And thank you, Janet, for all that you do for the TPM community. And very excited to have you here. And very excited to hand it over to you now to start our Fireside Chat.
All right. Thank you, Josie. And folks on the call, welcome to the event. So I'm Janat. I'm a host and organizer of TPM Meetups. So a lot of you I hear and I saw on the previous virtual meetups. And this is our first in-person TPM meetup since the whole lockdown. Yay! It's coming back to normal. So I think this is great. This is great to see people here. I see people on the line. We have more than 40 people joining us virtually and more joining as we just started. A little background on TPM meetups. So all before lockdown, we used to have meetups across Bay Area, across the industry. I do remember we actually had one in Amazon. I think in 2018, and it's great to be back because Amazon for me is my alma mater of TPM. I started as a TPM here back in 2014. So I've been with A9 before, then with AWS for about 5 years, and then moved on in my career path. And I think I made a full circle. So now we are here with the meetup and you all here as an audience. Um, we run this as a volunteer-based events, and all of these, the previous virtual ones, this event is all based on volunteering efforts by TPMs for TPMs. And I think that's great because that's where we want to be open. That's where we want to be curious, share all the best practices, the knowledge, and whatnot. If you are a first-time joiner for TPM Meetup, we do have a Slack space where we connect with each other, announce the events, and you can connect with all the speakers of the past TPM Meetups and this one at the Slack space. I know that there is also a TPM Discord channel, which is more bigger in numbers. So you're also welcome to join there. If you need the links, hit me up on LinkedIn. I can share the invites there. So I think virtual community of TPMs is pretty strong, and I'm really glad to see it coming to the in-person events. Today's event is special because it's a new format for us. It's hybrid. We have folks on the line, and we have folks in the room, and it's a new format. It's a fireside chat. This is something that I was envisioning for some number of months, if not years now, to have this type of events. Where we can talk to each other, where we can talk to the speakers in person, because there is some energy in all of this. And today, I think it's a great first in-person, first fireside chat with Josh, who Josie already introduced, released what I also think is the first book on the technical program management and not the last, right? So we see that there is a lot of books on product management, on agile, on developers, DevOps, and not a lot on TPMs. So we have the first one, more to come. And I probably need to confess, I was working on my writing project as well, but it was like taking too long. It's like publishing a book is not an easy undertaking. With that, I want to invite Josh, and I want all of you to kind of greet our speaker in the best TPM fashion. Welcome. Welcome, Josh.
Can you hear it? Okay. Sorry, I was also playing tech support in the back, so mind that. So that, we wear all multiple hats, right? It's our job.
Yes, that's what all the TPM about, right? Well, thank you, Josh, for joining us in person. Yeah. And Josh actually came down from Seattle this morning to see you all in person. So
and just to meet all you wonderful people.
Cool. Let's start with a little bit of introductions, right? And I'm trying to get my questions that I prepared for this. First of all, I want to frame our discussion based on your career, right? So I was looking through your career, and as I see, there are like three phases. Josh, the engineer, right? And then Josh, the TPM, and then the third one is Josh, the author. So I think it would be great for us to go through that journey, through your experience and how it all, I don't want to say concluded, but led to the book, right?
Fair. Yeah, okay.
Cool. Well, let's start from
Josh,
the beginning.
The engineer.
Josh, the engineer. So your career started as a software engineer back in Infologic and HP. So walk us through that experience, how you became interested in tech to begin with.
Yeah. So I've been in tech I've been a tech enthusiast most of my life. I grew up in Seattle, grew up in Redmond. So Microsoft was always right there. Everyone had Windows. Our schools had it early on. I built computers early on. So I'm pretty interested in tech, and actually started writing Visual Basic 6 in late middle school is kind of where my tech journey, if you will, like actually getting into programming started. Funny enough, though, there was a segue. My original degree is in geology at the University of Washington. I took the advice from an uncle who said, make sure to take one class that it has nothing to do with your interest. or nothing to do with what you think you want to major in. But that just looks interesting, and that was as they affectionately called it, Rocks for Jocks, or Introduction to Geology, and it was an absolutely amazing class. So I actually switched to a geology major, and then the oil industry picked me up. Ended up at InfoLogic, which they are the software arm of a geochemical company. And it actually ended up being, for me, it was a great fit. One, I understood my user base. I understood my customers. The people in the lab were using mass spectrometers and gas chromatography machines. And I was writing the software to interface with those and talk with one another and build reports and run analyses. So I was able to take and they happen to use Visual Basic 6. So I took this somewhat at the time rudimentary knowledge of, I know VB6 from an at-home hobby, and I know geology. And I was able to kind of marry the two together. And I did that for 6 or 7 years, I think. And at that time, I learned more and more about programming, obviously, because you have to on the job. Went back and got a second degree in computer science, thinking, okay, let's take this to the next level.
Awesome.
And when I could learn no more in InfoLogic, I got a job at HP. Funny though, HP listed me as a software engineer, right? And if anyone here knows people at HP, this is probably familiar territory. They have a lot of software engineers that never write code, and they didn't tell me that when I interviewed. And even after I accepted the job, and I come in, they're like, "Oh no, we pay you too much to write code. You're gonna help other people write code." Okay, sure. How do I do that? And so that started my journey into what I thought of as tech lead, but what I soon came to realize was really technical program management. So that's yeah.
It's interesting. I actually did not know you came from geology and the oil industry in that matter. And I think it's true about most of TPMs. People find their way to the role from all the different industries and all different other roles. Actually, I have a teammate at Robinhood who also switched from oil industry, and we have one friend here in the audience who's also from the oil industry. Yeah. So awesome.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your transition now from that software engineering role into the TPM. So how did that go?
Yeah, so like I said, it kind of started at HP. I joined there, and all of a sudden I was thrust into this. How do I tell others to code without coding? And you fumble at first. You're like, well, here, do that, right? Write this code, but you write it, I guess. And so you kind of fumble through trying to figure out how do you make that leap to kind of the mentor or the guider. And one of the TPMs there, she's since moved on to Apple, but she was a great inspiration to me. Taught me about swim lane diagrams, which seems silly, right? But I'm like, wait a minute, there's a way to speak this language. Like there is something here. There is what we call now artifacts. There is a way to communicate other than just talking. And I'm like, oh, I want to learn that. And so I started diving into swim lane diagrams and then just system architecture and data flows. And then that got me interested more into, okay, I think what I'm doing here is actually project management. So let's go down that path. And I started going down there. And Amazon actually then reached out to me. I was planning on moving back to Seattle. It's where I'm from. I was in oil, took me down to Texas, of course. But I had always planned on coming back. I was in the middle of getting married when they called. In the middle of planning the wedding, and okay, we're going to do that and just fly back down for the wedding because it's already been planned. And so planning from across the country, so I got to learn that skill early on.
It's also program management, right?
And it's also program management, exactly. Although my wife did a lot of that. There's incredible in that. But yeah, so I switched, and when I took that interview, I asked the same question that I get asked, even to mostly to this day, although I know interviews are a bit cold right now, is, so what is a TPM? Like, yeah, you're interviewing for TPM, but you still asked a question. And even 10 years ago, like, no clue what it was.
Right.
When I took the job, it took me the first 3 months to remember whether I was a technical project manager or a technical program manager. I had to keep going to look it up, like, am I project or program? And I didn't know that there was a difference at the time. So yeah, that was the start of that journey, and I've been at Amazon for 10 years.
Interesting question on the definition.
Yeah.
So how would you, Josh, the TPM and the author, define the technical program manager role today?
It's a misunderstood role, I think, in a lot of ways. People have the same question that I did. Am I a project manager? Am I a program manager? What is the difference? What am I? And I think I'm trying to decide which path to take here. The difference between project and program, or just what is a TPM? So what is a TPM?
Let's start. Yes, let's start.
So many avenues one could go down. So a TPM. I did this in a recent interview, but I love this, and it almost made it to the book, but I wasn't sure about copyright. But I love this. So there's a movie early 90s called Office Space.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Those of you who don't know it, this tech company was about to go through a huge series of layoffs. They brought in consultants. This is kind of a side plot, but it's the plot I'm concerned with here. Brought in consultants to figure out which of these jobs is important, and they bring in this one gentleman, and I think it's Pete and Pete, or just maybe Pete and Pete. They're like, so what do you do here? It's like, well, I talk to the engineers because they don't like to talk to customers, and the customers don't like to talk to the engineers. So I bridge the gap between the two of them. But he couldn't really put that eloquently enough to know this is a useful thing. And he was essentially describing a TPM, but they fired him because you don't need that job. Turns out we do. We absolutely do. And that to me, that quote is what I wanted in there. But the bridging the gap is a main motif for me in the book, because I think that really is kind of the crux of what we do. Is we are technical, but we're also program managers. It really is two kind of sides of the same coin, where our technical knowledge, our technical background and foundation allows us to effectively communicate in a program and project environment to stakeholders who are none the wiser to the intricacies of what's going on the technical side.
Makes sense. Well, let's talk about, since we are in Amazon, let's talk about your Amazon experience as well. You've been with Amazon for about 10 years?
July 8th will be 10 years.
That's when you're going to get your
red badge instead of the yellow badge. Yes.
I almost got to the yellow badge. I think I was a few weeks short.
Not many people do. Yeah. Not many people do. Yeah.
I do remember there was an internal tool, which I will not name because I don't think it sounds
it's still
good.
Named that. It's still
yes. Running in Amazon?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Interesting. But that was the tool where you can see how many people joined before you and after you at Amazon. It's not I would say, work safe name.
It's not a work safe name.
It's a fun one.
But I can tell you, last time I looked, I'm at somewhere in the 98th percentile.
Ooh, wow.
98% of Amazonians were hired after me.
Wow.
But it's quick to get to 50% though.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Getting to this yellow badge, the 5 years, is pretty coveted, and it is weird to think that this actually does come with a bit of clout. But once you get that yellow badge, people do look at you differently. They're just like, oh, you've seen some stuff,
right,
and you're still here. So yeah. Yes.
I used that back in the days. Mm-hmm. I would go to Phone Tool and look what's the Phone Tool is internal Amazon tool where you can look up anyone in Amazon, and it showed the badge color as well. So whenever some TPM would ping me with some message or email, I first go to Phone Tool and check how long they've been with Amazon. If I see 6 months, I was like, Okay.
You don't
Can
know
we
what
talk
you-
later, maybe? Talk to me later, please. But if they're being here for a while, they're like, okay, that's probably something important. I gotta talk to you. So how do you see the role evolved in your 10 years here in Amazon?
Well, we're still trying to figure out what TPM means.
10 years later.
Right. That's one of the reasons I decided to write the book. And like I said in my interviews, every time I still get asked, what is a TPM? So that's still out there. But that to me is more of an industry problem now. I think Amazon has done a pretty good job of defining that internally. There's still some team to team, there's some differences, but since I joined, actually, it was the year I joined, we started doing an internal TPM conference because we had noticed that back then of like, hey, we need to come together and kind of figure out what this is, who we are. And I think that has really helped us in understanding our journey and what a TPM means for us. And due to people not lasting at Amazon too long, they're able to take that knowledge and go out. And I think it's slowly starting to spread, and we're starting to get some resemblance or cohesiveness across the industry. But I still think we have a long ways to go. We still have a long ways to go. So.
Right. Industry and community. I think one thing that we not talk a lot about is actually case studies.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is a technical program in Amazon versus other companies versus Google? I'm from Robinhood. Like, what is a technical program in Robinhood? Having more real world technical program cases as like business cases, I think would really help all of us to grow together. Can you share an example of a particularly challenging or rewarding technical program that you led within Amazon? Well, something that's probably not NDA though.
No, yeah. There's actually a good one because it's relevant to what we're doing here. So for those of you who don't know, I'm part of the tax services group. So we write all of, we charge you your sales tax. I apologize. It's actually very complicated. That's why there's 250 some of us across 4 geographical locations. Tax is hard. And it gets harder every day because as they see one can make money, other governments join in on the fun and pass similar laws and make it more and more complicated. One of the fun projects that you can see here today, essentially, is Chime. Back when it was called Work Talk. One of the fun things we get to do at tax is we get to see everything in its beginning because everything has to be taxed. So we get to see everything Amazon is doing, and they came to us. Hey, we want to sell this product to companies. One of the things, right? You can dial in. And if you dial in, you hit telecom charges. Telecom charges, at least in the US, are highly regulated. If you ever look at your cell phone bill, you'll understand why. The complexity there is that's not the same thing as selling a pair of shoes. So we have this entire system that's built around I am retail. We sell goods, and all of a sudden we have to have this same ecosystem deal with a highly regulated part of the world out there, and that was one of those projects that went from shopping around to find out if it's even possible. Can we build a system that can actually marry the two of these things together successfully and at Amazon scale and be reliable? We didn't know the answer. And so we did a lot of upfront consulting work, checking with third-party companies, doing just basic research. And then once we thought we had general ideas, it's okay, now let's try to play around with the designs and see, will this work? Will that work? And that was a long journey, tail-ended by you have to be done by reInvent 2016.
As it happens, as always.
2016. Got the hoodie for it. So had to be done by then because they were going to announce it whether it was ready or not. So by golly, we got it ready. But that was probably one of the projects I was most proud about. That most beautiful project plan. Seriously, just beautiful project plan. I really enjoyed.
Well, that's actually interesting. like speaking of project plan or other learnings, like what some key lessons or best practices you learned from that or other programs in Amazon you've incorporated into the TPM handbook?
Oh, in general, so much I've learned. Stakeholder management to me is one of those really, really important areas that I think a lot of people kind of push to the side. They're like, oh, I really want to build this system, and I want to work with the devs and hit that milestone. But all of that is meaningless unless your stakeholders understand what's going on and understand the value add. And also, if they're not on board with what it is that you're trying to do, they're not going to give you those people to do the designs to hit those milestones. So making sure your stakeholders are all on the same page, that you can talk to them at the level that they need to be spoken to, that when you're communicating, you're in the middle of a crisis and you really don't want to talk to people because you're trying to solve something, you still have to communicate and in a way that's effective, that they can immediately understand, and you don't have to go into a 2-hour meeting to discuss why, right? You don't have time to do that. So learning that effective communication of, here's the email or here's the status report. We love in Amazon, right? We love written reports, or written like email form or PDF or something along those lines. Here's my written status report, right? And that's a really valuable tool, because if you do it right, they can read it and say, okay, I get it. That's fine. You know what you're doing. You'll solve it. If you don't write it well, here come the meetings, and meeting after meeting after meeting with however many levels you have to go up to try to explain to them what you weren't able to write on paper.
Right. The writing culture of Amazon is very strong.
Yeah.
I do remember these reviews where you come into the room and then the first 15, 20 minutes
is reading the document.
Yeah. It's pretty interesting. So let's talk about the book a bit.
Sure.
So in a nutshell, what is the Technical Program Manager's Handbook about, and what can readers expect to learn from it?
God, can I just read the back? So the way I tried to frame it when writing this, right, is one, we need a common foundation of what a TPM is, so that I try to give that to you in the book through what I see as the foundational pillars. And there are, if you troll on LinkedIn at all, you'll see variations on this that I actually found out after the book. I'm like, there are other ones out there, but it's a similar sort of idea of there's some sort of foundation involved here. And for me, it's the technical side, the project side, and the program side. The project and program for me were really important, because I think that's an area that in the wider TPM community we really haven't explored. We haven't talked about, am I just running a bunch of projects? Am I just a project manager but I have 10 of them going on? Or am I actually running a program?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a very large difference there. And I don't think every company really understands that. So that I was trying to lean in on that a bit to really kind of help define, like, no, this is where you want to be at the end of the day. You want to be a program manager with that technical background. So hopefully it helps those who are maybe new to the role, trying to transition from an IC individual contributor of some sort into the role, or those who are in the role but are looking to dive a little bit deeper and get a better understanding of what it is that they're doing day to day.
Right. So reading your book, I do remember you talked about program Mercury, which in the book you described that this was your personal, I would say, project one of the company. Let's talk about that, because you used that as a sample program throughout the book. So I was curious to learn about it a little bit.
That was one of those. So a little bit of insight on that. I was somewhere around chapter 3, and I'm trying to come up with a case study. or trying to come up with an example for that chapter. And I realized, like, one, okay, half the stuff I do is NDA. I can obfuscate it out, but to a point to where is it even really going to make sense enough for you to then build on top of? And then I was looking forward at my outline and like, I'm gonna have to do this for every chapter, and I really didn't want to do that. So I stopped and I'm like, wait a minute, let's find a single program that I can use as a case study and use that same one and just build on top of that, where I don't have to keep going back and rebuilding up the context. I can just take the context that I've already given to you and just and just build on top of it. So I looked back on things that I could draw from without anyone suing me, and it's I thought I muted that. That's fun. That was my wife. I was looking back on this program, and when I was at Infologic, they wouldn't let us have our own messaging service. Like, they wouldn't let us download. I was ICQ at the time. Thinking back, really, to 2007. Any of the Trillium, I think it was another one. Like any of those, they wouldn't let, because it required a server, and like, we're not going to pay for that. And heck, if you're going to go to an external site, because that's sending data out, right? So I'm sitting here, and I'm in my computer science class, and I need a capstone, and I'm like, well, why don't I just build a distributed messaging system? And so I did that for my capstone, and I had my software department use it. Like, well, let's just use this to chat, and we used it while I was there. And I thankfully found the code while I was writing this book, because it was 10 years ago at this point. I'm like, do I still have that? So I found the code and refamiliarized myself with it. I'm like, I think I can, if we can take this and expand that to a what if, and let's say, what if I actually built this to scale? What if we actually said we're gonna launch this out in the world? Spoiler alert, there actually are now. I had some friends who were reviewing the book saying, oh yeah, here's X company X and company Y. I'm like, I'm gonna pretend, let's just see what happens if I do this. And so that was kind of the reason I brought that in.
Awesome. Yeah. I think that will add more personal touch if people will really know that was a real project that you really rolled out, and it's a real world case for that.
Jonathan, do we have any messages or any questions on the Slido?
Yes. Great timing, because I just opened Slido, and I invite all the virtual participants. So there is a link on the LinkedIn event page, and also thank you, Ben Tobin, who actually wrote forward for you.
He wrote the forward for me. Yep.
So thank you, Ben, for sharing that link in the chat. So check the link.
Oh yeah, thanks, Ben.
Let's go to questions from Slido, and then probably questions from the audience as well. So we'll have a mic going, and just raise your hand if you will have questions. But let's first make it full hybrid experience and take care of our virtual participants as well.
Yeah.
Question number 1. Is there a standard definition for the TPM role and levels that can be handed over to HR, VP of Program Management Offices, CPOs, CDOs, and Agile-like manifesto?
No.
Are you aware?
No, and unfortunately, again, that's one of the reasons I went and wrote the book, is there is no standard definition. I don't think even the book gets us quite there yet, at least in its current edition. I would love to build and continue. I'd love to get us there. But no, at the moment, there just isn't.
Awesome. Another question. What are your thoughts about people who are discovering that they really are TPMs, but have a different title, and how to advocate for getting recognition?
Oh, I love that. That last part really makes that question.
Yes.
But first, I will shout out. I did do an interview recently where that did happen to someone, where they were automatically turned into a TPM by their HR. They just, by the way, you're a TPM now. I'm like, what is that? So it does happen. I understand. And yes, like, so even my role at HP, where I was a software I didn't reach expert. I was whatever the level right below software engineering expert was. Long time ago.
Staff?
No, they didn't have staff yet. That was not the word du jour in 2006. Yeah, they didn't have that yet. But I was essentially TPM, even though they just called me a software developer. So it is that same sort of thing. What you do, at least in my humble opinion, it's all about your artifacts. And there's two ways of an artifact. If that might be too much of a PMP term, apologies. Artifact being a project plan, a stakeholder communication plan, if people actually still write those out. The something that I put thought into this. That is an artifact. From a TPM world, those are your artifacts. I put in thought. I made this thing.
6-pager.
A 6-pager, a status report. But one level further than that, and I think the more important side, because those are easy to find and understand and identify. The harder ones to identify, and I think where we provide the most value is where we're influencing others. And that is often in a Slack call, in a Chime call, in the hallway, in a design room. But through your conversations with your developers, your other TPMs, your VPs who want you to do X instead of Y, you are influencing them and guiding them towards the right path, or in the moment what you believe is the right path. Capturing those moments in one way, either just make a note to yourself to remind yourself that on this day this thing happened, or if there's then an email follow-up of hey, this is what we decided. Capture that, cite it. That is how you show your value. And if you're acting as a TPM but you're not seeing but you're not being graded in that way or seen that way from your manager, building up that evidence, I think, is really kind of a good way to do that, of showing okay, so here's what a TPM is. Here's all the things I'm doing that proves this is actually what I'm doing. Let's have a discussion here. But that evidence is, I think, really key.
The recognition comes from the materials that people can actually interact with, like your artifacts, your influence. They see you in action.
Yeah, and that's the problem with the influences is you don't always see that. I mean, you see it in that they are doing X instead of Y now.
Yeah.
But did they know you were the one that led them down that path? So that's the nuance that you have to kind of be self-aware. And it's kind of weird to be oh, hey, yeah, I'm doing this thing. I just did that. But you have to be cognizant at some level and wow, words, and just note that somewhere. In some way.
I want to take one more question from Slido, and then we can take questions from the audience. But this one is interesting. This is something we actually spoke a little bit before the event.
Okay.
The question goes as follows. Many of the skills for successful TPMs seem to overlap with those of very senior individual contributors.
Mm-hmm.
I would assume the question is about software engineers.
Yeah.
As they grow, what distinguishes one from the other?
Beautiful. As you grow, and this is going to be maybe a little biased because I do work at Amazon and have been here for a while, but I happen to agree with it very well. And I say that because I see myself as a very technical individual. I almost went people management, but after 2 months of diving into that, I'm you know what? I still have a lot of technical side to give, so I'm sticking with that IC. So I see myself, the T is very heavy for me, and the project management is a lot of fun, but it's there because I have the technical. So what the way I see this, and I think the way some in the industry see it, is the higher you climb on that individual contributor side, software developers being the big one, sys devs, DevOps, those sort of, they're all individual contributor roles. the more senior you become, the less it is about those tangible artifacts of I wrote code, I cleaned up this pipeline, I did these tangible things that you can see and write queries about to see that this stuff exists, and more about how am I influencing others and the org to make the right decision. And so at Amazon, we realized that to a point, that at a certain level, and it's so I'm a principal technical program manager. At senior principal technical program manager at Amazon, the roles actually converge. So a developer and a TPM both become senior principal in tech, because at that level, that developer is no longer writing code and probably hasn't been for a while. And that project manager better not be writing status reports, better not be, or dealing with those individual projects and programs. More so, they are there to influence and say, I see these trends. These are the sort of things we should be solving, or getting all of the right people together to solve those larger problems. So we realize at that point that they are indistinguishable. So if you are an IC, and you are looking to climb that ladder, this book should still have a lot of value there, because a lot of these parts intertwine.
Nice. With that, actually, speaking of the community, I wonder if anyone has a question from the audience. We should have a mic.
Did we put it back?
Any volunteers? Anyone? Okay.
Thank you.
So, just continuing on that conversation of last question, it's very interesting that Amazon has this title senior principal, because many companies have a title like after principal, you become either you take on the managerial role, or you become distinguished engineer or distinguished TPM, right?
Yep.
So, just curious, like how does that look like at Amazon? Like, is there something besides senior principal also?
So it's a little bit of a tomato situation. And when I was researching the book, and trying to compare Amazon to Google to Meta to Microsoft, you have this problem of they use this term and these guys use that term, and trying to figure out where those levels actually do line up, especially when that target is moving. So from an Amazon perspective, that is currently evolving. So like I said, recently we did merge at senior principal to become senior principal in tech. So extrapolating that's an L8. So then you skip up. We don't have L9, so you skip up to L10, and that is where your distinguished comes in. So you can be a distinguished TPM, but the TPM, like I said, once you get to the level, the senior principal, you are just a technical individual contributor. So that's kind of where that comes. So then you're right. In some other companies, the senior principal may line up with distinguished. I've worked, for instance, I work with software development managers next to me who started out in a company where they were the director of such and such. Because for them at that company, being a director, they had 50 people underneath them. Well, here, a senior SDM with SDMs underneath them could very easily fill that role. So you're a senior SDM. So the titles themselves, they just don't line up too well. If that makes sense.
Thanks. Any other questions? And then I know we have a person who raised their hand.
Raise their hand on. Yeah. Someone knows how to use time.
So we'll get to your question in a moment. I just had a small follow-up to this question. How heavy is it, the T in TPM, where I come from? 20 years in the oil and gas side, not in the IT side. I'm just transferred to IT past 2 years, and
nice.
I aspire to be in TPMs one day, but the the learning curve is pretty steep for me for the technical side, and I get a lot of help thanks to my friends. However, I was just wondering, is it possible, or have you seen any TPMs that are less T but more PM?
More PM, totally. That again, since the role is not well defined across the industry, there are certainly a lot of companies, and even Amazon is just a bunch of small companies working under the same roof, right? So there are even orgs within Amazon where they lean more on the PM than they do on the T. I fought that battle, as it were, for a number of years at the beginning, where they really wanted me to do a lot of DevOps. I'm like, no, I'm not an operations guy. That you have managed, like you've figured that out. I'm not going to hold your hand. I need to go solve other things, and there was a lot of push and pull there. But that was the choice I made in that moment for my org of I want to lean on the T. To me, that T is very important, but that's very much where I am and where that role requires it. If you look at the book, I talk a lot about just wearing different hats, and at a TPM, if you look at the Venn diagram, and there's lots of them out there, by the way. I've seen some that are like 7 or 8 deep. I went with the 3 deep just because it's easier to visualize, but there's a lot of overlap. There's a lot of overlap between us and roles around us, and our job is kind of filling in those gaps. You may, even within the same company, go from like my team right now, we don't have many product managers yet. We focus more on the technical program side first, and so we've filled a lot of that product manager role because there's a gap there, and so we've leaned into that where we need to. But as we bring on product managers, we can pull ourselves away, allow them to do that, and then we shift our strengths elsewhere. So yes, absolutely. You just need to find the company or the role that fits your particular skills. I still encourage you, even once you find that, even if they don't, let's say, lean on the team much, lean on it on yourself. That being in that area where you have good PM skills, let's say, like you're great at project management and program management. So find a job that leans on that, to where you're just kind of, like, I'm doing this, I'm coasting this, I've got that, to where you can start focusing on that T and build that up. And then if you see another job that, like, oh, now I can focus a bit more over here on the T and really dive deeper into that. Now that I have a good foundation, let's shift over there. So it's all about just finding that right job to allow yourself to grow.
Thank you. Next, let's go to our virtual participants, and then I know there are two hands were raised here. 3, 4. Wow. Okay, this will go for a long time, but I want to give an opportunity for our virtual participants as well. So I know Cedric raised a hand on the call. If you can unmute and state your question.
Yep.
Yes. Welcome.
Yeah, hey everyone. I have actually 2 questions. The first one is like for folks who are coming not from the engineering background. So would you recommend to do the boot camp or pursue the master's degree? And second question is the differentiation between the TPM and evangelist. So if you could please answer these 2 questions.
Yeah, I feel like that second one might go more towards you. Sorry, the first one though, you were saying, should I take? It was a specific class. I didn't hear the class.
It was the boot camp, coding boot camp, or versus pursuing master's in computer science.
Okay, yeah. I do not have a master's in computer science. I did not go that route. I did not actually go a route of a master's. I just got a second bachelor's degree. I think for that, to me, it's a bit of a to each his own. What fits well for you. I love knowledge. That's why I do this job. So I would definitely go after that. That boot camp, that coding boot camp. For me, my early years as a TPM, I was grepping logs. I didn't know Linux, and I came to Amazon. I'm like, well, I guess I need to learn that. So I started to learn Linux, and simple enough to, like, how do I log into the server? How do I get to the logs? how do I use this grep function, and what are the different names of all the different notepads that are built in, and why does one person love this one over this one? Right, the many rabbit holes you can go down, but to me, those were important for me to feel confident in what I was doing, what my developers were doing, being able to look at the logs if something went wrong instead of having to wait for a developer. So for me, that's very powerful. But as I was telling Yurbal earlier, it depends on where you land on your TPM role. The T may not be to the point where they're expecting you to do that. I have plenty of colleagues that don't know those things, that can't log into logs well and go into logs to grep them to figure out what's going on, and that's perfectly fine. Personally, I would.
Nice. I can add to that. So in my perspective, the boot camps usually give you the coding skills. Now, what you need in TPM is more systems and architecture.
Mhm.
And I think master degree will gear you up better than a coding bootcamp. Like
Sure.
you can write a Python script with ChatGPT. I was able to write a decent Python script like in 20 minutes. It would take me maybe a day without ChatGPT. But coding doesn't give you all the logic behind how systems interact with each other. So
True.
I would advocate for
Yeah, no, that's right. And I think it again, depending on the type of team you're working with, there are some teams where there's a lot of just coding going on, and so it could be valuable. But yes, at the end of the day, like if you look at scale, system and architecture are more important.
Right. So I want to be yes, I want to be cautious with the time. So we do have 3 questions here. We do have 3 hands raised on Chime. People figured out the feature, and we still have questions on Slido. Let's do maybe like
over here and grab some water real quick.
Sure. Let's do like quick question answer kind of. What do they say? Fire.
Yeah. Fire. I will.
Okay.
10 words or less.
Arvind, your hand was first, and then we'll go to me here, and then we can go to you. Okay? Sounds good.
I will try to keep it as brief as possible. Nice to meet you, Josh. Given the lot of innovations that are happening today with the productivity that we can see with the massive seeing AI agents everywhere in a workspace coming very soon, do you see the roles of PM, EMs can do a lot of TPM work?
10 words. 10 words. 10 words. This goes back to Web 1.0, even Web 2.0, where we just had no clue what we were getting into. Yes, there will come a point where a lot of what we do, Chat GPT, et cetera, can do. Where we find value at that point is in our soft skills, and that's just you're not going to be able to replicate that anytime soon. So that is where a lot of our value will be. Now, hopefully, we'll be able to use those tools ourselves. I'm working with AI. I want to do project plans using AI because though it's fun, it's a lot of work and changes so often. I would love to be able to offload that, and I think we'll get there.
I'd love to chime in on that. Speaking of the strategic influence, I think to me all the AI is past looking, right? So they are not future looking. They cannot look what's coming up next, what's needed next for the company, for the business, for the product. So I think that's where the key value will remain. So can you chart the strategic path for the problem space you're working on? And then you can do all the project plans in ChatGPT, which yes, I happen to do already. Okay, here you're next.
Yeah, I would like to ask a question about the T part of the TPM basically. So can you give like 1 or 2 examples of your daily contribution, like especially considering the T part of the TPM, and how do TPMs basically keep themselves up to date with the latest happening from the technology perspective, because they themselves are not coding, are not doing any hands-on day-to-day job, but they're influencing that job kind of basically.
Yeah. So to be quick examples. I'm in design reviews often. I'm there to impart business understanding onto that system design, or that system design onto the architecture landscape around it, right? That dev is, I need to build a system that does X, Y, and Z because that's what my requirements are saying. They aren't necessarily, though sometimes they are, especially as you get more senior, they aren't necessarily looking at what are the 20 systems around them, what is the company attempting to move towards. And so you're bringing in those sort of perspectives into that design to help guide them. Because technically you may have two answers that are perfectly fine, but one of those is going to add better value and send you in the right architecture direction for the company or for your organization. So that's an area. That was a long one, so we'll just do the one. And then how do we keep up? How do we keep abreast? System design and architectural, which is where I see a lot of our value comes in. You can do things like AWS classes to understand what are the new tools coming out there to kind of plug things together. But even absent of those, of knowing the specific tool that does that specific job, that name or whatever, you can still understand and come up with a system to get you from point A to point B, or to look at a system and see whether those pieces are going to fit together. And like that general understanding of how systems interconnect don't change as quickly as some of the more nuanced, which language am I using, which one is faster. Redshift is faster than plug in some other thing, right? It's still, I need a data system that is either big data, a non-relational, or it's relational. Like those sort of concepts, those bigger areas, that's really where you're putting more focus into. Again, if you like to learn, take the AWS courses to learn more about things, or the Azure courses, or does Google do? I assume Google does courses, Jesse.
I just have one follow-up question. Can I? Sorry. So basically, it's a combination of solution architect and program management.
Yeah. So I've read the solution architect book, at least in partial. And again, depending on the role you're in, if the T is heavier, then you're gonna lean a lot into that solutions architect. Unless you have one on your team, then you got to kind of talk to him and her and figure that out. But
yeah. Thank you.
Hey, Josh. Hey. Turn on. I can hear him.
Thanks, Josh, for writing this wonderful book for TPM community.
Yeah.
I have one question. Like as you mentioned, like TPM is a complex role, and we try to bridge the gap between various on the ecosystem. Like we work with the product management, or in absence we fill out that gap. And as a part of T, we work with the different architect, solution architect, and those area. So where do you see like T part or TPM is having some cross line where we are not stepping in the role of architect or developer or those, because nobody like to step on others.
So that is a soft skill. That's I hate to say it depends, but it does largely depend, right? Every project or program I start, one of the first things you have to do is that communication and that stakeholder management. If this project has an architect, talk to them. Understand where each other's boundaries need to be, where you want to help each other. And that may be different on the next project, because the nuances of what that project needs may be different. And so you might step in again to fill in different roles. You're going to step on each other's toes. Again, the Venn diagrams are there to illustrate that we all step on each other's toes, or can, because we all overlap. And that's on purpose, because if we don't overlap, then we don't understand each other at any level. We can't communicate effectively. So that conversation is always going to be there, but it's project to project, program to program, or situation to situation. You need to talk to your team to understand what those boundaries are. Real quick to that, I have that argument all the time at my team, SDM versus TPM. Not argument.
Healthy debate.
Yeah, healthy debate that I have many one pagers and 6 pages on, and it evolves as the team evolves, as we get more complex and we have more of this and less of that, and we're more spread out. That answer becomes more nuanced and it has to change over time. So it's never a one and done situation. The conversation is always ongoing.
Awesome. I think we're actually at time. I know that there are 2 more people on the call with hand raised, and we have few questions unanswered on Slido. But what I want to propose is actually to end here. It's sharp 5:30, so we need to be at time as 2 TPMs. And then maybe Josh, you and I, we can follow up on those questions either on LinkedIn or on Slack or Discord, what we'll find. Dimple, Viju, I know your questions are important. Please send them my way and we'll figure out how to answer them. And with that, really grateful for your wisdom today. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining and participating. So proud.
Snacks.
There are still snacks, and the folks on the line. I want to remind what Josie actually mentioned at the beginning of the call is that 3 of us are gearing up to host
the 3 of us.
Yes, 3 of us. Well, it hopefully will be much more of us because we are gearing up to set a TPM summit this fall. So the idea is to have a full day big scale event with multiple speakers, multiple fireside chats. This was a preparation. So we wanted to see whether we want to do it in person, hybrid, fully virtual. So thank you all for participating in the experiment. All your feedback will be really valuable to us. And if you folks are willing to help, come talk to us. Yeah. Any closing notes from any of you?
Thank you all for joining. This was a lot of fun. It's lovely to talk shop. So hopefully we get to do a full day of that. Like I said, at Amazon, we do this every year, and I'd love to share that with the rest of the community because I think it's important for the community as a whole to come together and understand what it is that we do.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.